Good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Zazula, and I'm a student in the Department of Psychology at Concordia University. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a study I conducted in an effort to validate the HEXACO personality inventory, which is a model of personality that has been proposed as a more cross-culturally relevant alternative to the more well-established five-factor model of personality. In terms of an overview, first, I'm going to describe the general research problem, the development of the HEXACO model as an alternative to the five-factor model, the issue of cross-cultural applicability, and the ongoing debate regarding the validity of the HEXACO scale. I will then discuss the study itself, so the methods that were used, my hypotheses, and the results that I found. I will conclude by reflecting on what these results suggest regarding the validity of the HEXACO-PI, as well as some of the methodological shortcomings of the experiment. Broadly speaking, this research relates to the issue of weird populations, previously discussed by Rad and coworkers. Psychological science has demonstrated a problematic reliance on samples from weird populations in its efforts to draw universal theoretical conclusions. Because this population is not representative of humanity at large, this practice runs the risk of significantly distorting or limiting our understanding of human psychology. The HEXACO model can be understood as a response to this kind of problem in the realm of theories related to personality structure and individual differences. As Ashton and Lee note, where the highly prominent five-factor model was developed through lexical analysis of the English language exclusively, the HEXACO model was developed from lexical analysis of a dozen additional languages. The HEXACO model is distinct from the Big Five in two primary ways. First, its dimensions of agreeableness and emotionality represent a reorganization of facets associated with the Big Five's agreeableness and neuroticism. And second, it proposes a new sixth dimension of honesty-humility. Of course, there continues to be debate regarding HEXACO's validity and whether or not it actually captures real and distinct personality traits. There is thus an ongoing need to validate the HEXACO-PI in terms of both its internal structure and its relation to external measures. So looking now to the experiment itself, 113 undergraduate psychology students from Concordia University were surveyed, all of whom were enrolled in an advanced research methods course. They completed a partial 60-item version of the HEXACO-PI. Participants were presented with personality items, and you can see an example here on the top left, and were asked to report their level of agreement on a 5-point Likert scale ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. They also completed 4 supplemental questions regarding their estimated GPA, time spent outdoors, intelligence, and ethical importance. And you can see the item for ethical importance is here on the bottom left. Participants used a slider to indicate their response on a distinct range of values for each question. Participants were also given the moral identity scale and a moral reasoning task. Items were administered using Qualtrics software in the order they have been described. There were 3 hypotheses for this study. First, low interscale correlations were expected between all HEXACO traits. This was an attempt to replicate previous findings from Ashton and Lee and to gather divergent evidence to validate the internal structure of the scale by demonstrating the orthogonality of its dimensions. I also expected to find modest positive correlations between conscientiousness and estimated GPA and honesty, humility, and ethical importance. Ideally, these correlations would be noticeably stronger than any of the interscale correlations. These 2 hypotheses were meant to serve as converging evidence to validate the external structure of the scale by analyzing its relation to other theoretically related variables. Pearson correlations were calculated for each hypothesis. 3 participants were removed as outliers for high conscientiousness. Weak correlations were found between most of the HEXACO traits, with 2 exceptions, namely a correlation of 0.47 between conscientiousness and honesty-humility, and 0.38 between conscientiousness and openness. Weak positive correlations were found between conscientiousness and estimated GPA, and honesty, humility, and ethical importance, with an R of 0.11 and 0.29 respectively. So what do these results mean? First, our findings for hypothesis 1 were mixed. Results for most of the traits were consistent with previous findings, but correlations between conscientiousness and both openness and honesty-humility were much higher than expected. I also found no clear support for hypotheses 2 and 3. Correlations for both were much lower than expected. So overall, I would say the study failed to generate substantial validity evidence for the HEXACO-PI. However, this should not be taken to mean that the scale itself is invalid, as these findings were likely influenced by methodological issues with the study itself. First, we only used a partial version of the HEXACO-PI, and indeed one that was different than the 60-item version that had been previously validated by Ashton and Lee. We also used a relatively biased sample of students, since the entire sample was composed of honor students. This might help to explain some of the issues around conscientiousness and openness in our results, as this group would likely score quite consistently high in both dimensions. Future efforts to validate the HEXACO-PI in this population could thus try using the complete version of the inventory and a more representative sample. Thanks very much for listening.